You know that feeling when you open your bank app and instead of immediately closing it in horror, you actually smile. The number sitting there is enough that you stop calculating whether you can afford that coffee. You stop wondering if buying groceries means living on ramen until Friday. There's a very specific number where this shift happens, and it is almost certainly not the number most people think it is. Most finance gurus will tell you that you need $1 million to feel wealthy, or that six figures is the magic line. Others will pitch you whatever course they happen to be selling that month. They are all missing one critical thing. There is a much smaller milestone that completely transforms your relationship with money. And once you cross it, everything quietly changes underneath you. That number is $20,000. I know that sounds anticlimactic, and I know it sounds way too small to be the answer to anything. That is exactly why almost nobody talks about it. And it is why the people who quietly cross it end up living a completely different financial life than people who never do. My name is Finn, and welcome to Finn Invests. I spend an unreasonable amount of time thinking about money and the psychology behind it, about why some people effortlessly build wealth while others stay locked in the same paycheck to paycheck loop for 30 years straight. If you actually want to understand the mechanics behind how this works, instead of just hoping things magically improve, hit subscribe. Drop a like if this video helps you see money differently. It genuinely makes a difference for the channel. Now, before we get into why 20,000 is the real game changer, let me ask you something. When you picture building wealth, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture some trust fund kid who never had to worry about a bill in their life. Or maybe you picture someone grinding it out for 40 years, slowly stacking up wealth $1 at a time. The truth is, wealth building does not actually work the way most people think it does. Here's what really happens. There are certain financial thresholds that act like invisible barriers in your life. And once you cross them, the rules of the game completely change. $20,000 is the first major threshold of your entire financial life. It is the line that separates people who will eventually build real wealth from those who spend their entire working life one bad month away from disaster. The crazy part is, most people have no idea this threshold even exists. Think about it this way. If you have ever tried to push a heavy boulder up a hill, you know that getting it started is the hardest part. You are straining and sweating and making very little progress, questioning whether it is even possible. But once you build enough momentum, something almost magical happens. The boulder starts moving faster, and eventually, when you reach the top, it rolls down the other side effortlessly. $20,000 is the exact spot where your financial boulder finally crests that hill. Everything before this point feels like you are pushing uphill against gravity. Everything after this point feels like gravity is finally working in your favor. But here is where it gets really interesting. And this part will probably surprise you. The difference is not just mathematical. It is not simply that you have more money to invest or that your returns are larger in absolute terms. The real magic actually happens inside your brain. When you do not have money saved, your brain operates in what psychologists call survival mode. Every financial decision gets filtered through fear and scarcity. You take the first job offer that comes along, even if it is terrible, because you cannot afford to be picky. You stay in situations you hate because leaving feels too risky. You say yes to things you do not want to do because you need the money. This is not just about being practical or responsible. When you are stuck in survival mode, your brain literally cannot think about growth or opportunity. It is like trying to plan a vacation while your house is on fire. Your mental bandwidth is completely consumed by immediate threats and short-term survival. But something remarkable happens when you cross that $20,000 threshold. Suddenly, your brain has the space to think differently. And instead of asking, how do I survive until next paycheck? You start asking, how can I grow this money? Instead of being reactive to whatever financial crisis pops up next, you become proactive about building wealth. Vanguard's research shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases your financial well-being by 21%. That is less than most people spend on a vacation or a fancy laptop. But that small buffer moves you out of pure survival mode. When you push that emergency fund up to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which lands around $20,000 for most people, you get another 13% boost. More importantly, you have created enough breathing room for your brain to start thinking about building wealth instead of just wealth preservation. Here is where the math starts getting exciting. Let's say you are saving $1,000 every month and earning an 8% return. Getting to your first 20,000 takes about 19 months of consistent saving. That is a year and a half of discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. It is not easy, and frankly, most people give up somewhere along the way. But here's the part that will blow your mind. Your second 20,000 does not take another 19 months. It only takes about 17. Why? Because now you have got that first 20,000 working alongside your monthly contributions, generating its own returns. Think about that for a second. You did the exact same amount of work and saved the same amount each month. You took the same level of risk with your investments, but you shaved 2 full months off the timeline just because you had more money working for you. That is the power of compound interest finally starting to kick in. By the time you are going for your third 20,000, the timeline shrinks even more. Your money is doing an increasing share of the heavy lifting while you put in the same effort. And once you get to the really big numbers, the acceleration becomes almost comical. Once you cross 400,000 in your investment portfolio, you can generate your next 20,000 in just 5 months. The same amount that took nearly 2 years to save initially is now happening automatically through your investments. That first milestone feels impossible, but every milestone after it gets progressively easier. Now, you might be assuming that wealthy people have access to some secret investment world that regular folks cannot touch. Like there are exclusive hedge funds or special opportunities that unlock at certain wealth levels. While there is some truth to that at the ultra high end, it is not what is driving this $20,000 phenomenon. The real secret is much simpler and honestly, much more encouraging. It is just basic math working in your favor. When you invest $1,000 and it grows 10% in a year, you make $100. Take that exact same 10% growth rate and apply it to $10,000. Suddenly, you are looking at $1,000 in profit. Same investment, same time frame, same level of risk. This is exactly why hitting 20,000 feels like such a turning point. Up until that point, your investment returns feel insignificant because you're working with smaller amounts. A 10% return on $2,000 is $200. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. But a 10% return on $20,000 is $2,000. Now we are talking about money that actually matters. When you have got $20,000 sitting in investments earning 8% annually, that is $1,600 flowing into your account over a year. Money you did not have to earn through your job. Money that just showed up because your existing money was working on your behalf. The investment strategy is not even any more sophisticated than what someone with $1,000 can use. You can buy the same index funds and brokerages and follow the same principles. The only difference is scale. And that scale is what transforms small percentage wins into real financial progress. But here's the part most people completely miss. And it might be the single most important point in this entire video. When you save $20,000, you have actually accomplished something far more valuable than just stacking up money. You have fundamentally rewired your brain and built the most important financial habit you will ever develop. I know that sounds like self-help nonsense, but stick with me because this is where it gets really practical. Think about what it actually takes to save $20,000 from zero. Unless you make absurd money or live rent-free, this requires serious discipline. You had to track where every dollar was going. You had to say no to things you wanted so you could set money aside instead. You had to resist the urge to blow your savings on whatever shiny object caught your attention that week. Most importantly, you had to do all of this consistently for months or even years. And here's the kicker. You proved to yourself that you can actually control your money instead of letting it control you. You became the type of person who can delay gratification when it really matters. That is not just a financial skill. That is a life skill. This identity shift is huge because it affects every financial decision you make going forward. Before you had $20,000 saved, buying a $4 coffee might have required mental gymnastics about affording it. After you hit $20,000, you stop sweating the small stuff. You have already proven you can make the big sacrifices when necessary. But there is another psychological shift at this level that almost nobody talks about. You start seeing opportunities instead of just threats. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, every unexpected expense feels like a disaster. Your car needs repairs, your laptop dies, your rent goes up. These are not opportunities. They are financial emergencies that derail your entire month. But when you have 20,000 in the bank, those same events shrink down to minor inconveniences at worst. Your car needs repairs, annoying but not catastrophic. Your laptop dies, time to upgrade to something better. Your rent goes up. Maybe it is finally time to look for a better place or negotiate your salary even better. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but you could not take advantage of before. Your friend mentions they are starting a business and looking for investors. Before, you would have thought, that sounds interesting, and moved on. Now you can actually consider whether it is worth throwing 5,000 at it. A killer deal pops up on a rental property that needs some work. Before, you would have scrolled past on Zillow. Now you can run the numbers and see if it makes sense as an investment. Your boss mentions there is a conference in another city that could be huge for your career, but the company will not pay for it. Before, you would have made excuses about why you could not go. Now you can weigh the actual return on investment. This is what wealthy people actually mean when they say money goes to money. It is not some cosmic conspiracy where the universe rewards people who already have cash. It is that having money gives you options, and options create more opportunities to make money. Here's something else that happens around the $20,000 mark that will probably make you question everything you thought you knew about budgeting. You start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. I know that sounds backwards, but hear me out. When you are broke, you obsess over every single purchase. Should I buy the name brand cereal or the generic version? Is it worth spending $3 on coffee when I could just make it at home? Should I get the premium gas or the regular? These tiny decisions consume your mental energy because every dollar feels precious. But when you have a solid financial foundation, you realize, access, these micro decisions are largely irrelevant. The difference between buying coffee and making it at home is maybe $1,000 per year. That is not nothing, but it will not make or break your future. What actually matters are the big decisions: where you live, what you drive, how much you save, where you invest. These choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over time. So instead of agonizing over the organic bananas, you focus your energy on optimizing your housing costs, maximizing your income, and making sure your investment strategy is solid. This shift in focus is incredibly liberating because it frees up mental bandwidth for the decisions that actually matter. You stop sweating the small stuff and start thinking strategically about wealth building. Now, let's talk about what happens to your career once you cross this milestone, because this is where it gets interesting. Having 20,000 saved does not just change your relationship with money, it changes your relationship with work. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, you are essentially trapped in whatever job you currently have. Your boss could be terrible. Your coworkers could be toxic. The work could be mind-numbing, but you cannot leave because you need that next paycheck to survive. This puts you in an incredibly weak negotiating position. You cannot ask for a raise because you're afraid they might fire you. You cannot push back on unreasonable demands because you need the job more than they need you. You cannot explore other opportunities because taking time off for interviews feels too risky. You are stuck, and everyone in the building knows it. But $20,000 completely changes that dynamic. Suddenly, you have what I call walking away money. You could quit tomorrow and survive for months while you find something better. This does not mean you should be reckless or burn bridges unnecessarily, but it does mean you are negotiating from a position of strength instead of pure desperation. This single shift affects everything about how you approach work. You start asking for the raise you deserve because the worst they can say is no. You push back on unreasonable requests because you are no longer afraid. You explore new opportunities because you can finally afford to take some calculated risks. Here's what is really crazy. Most of the time, you do not even need to use your walking away money. Just having it changes your entire demeanor at work. You become more confident, more assertive, and more willing to take on challenging projects. Guess what happens when you show up differently? People notice. Suddenly, you are getting better assignments, recognition, and yes, more money. It is like having a secret superpower. Knowing it is there changes how you operate. The best part is, the more successful you become at work, the faster you build wealth, which gives you more option and confidence. It is a feedback loop that accelerates over time. But here is where most people completely blow it, and I see it constantly. They hit 20,000, feel that psychological shift, and then immediately torch the whole thing on something stupid. Maybe they decide they deserve a new car, or they take an expensive vacation, or they use it as a down payment on a house they cannot afford. Please do not do this. That $20,000 is not a reward. It is the foundation of your financial future, the seed that grows into generational wealth if you let it compound. And here's a number that will probably make you laugh or cry, depending on your situation. The average person spends more on cars in their lifetime than it would take to achieve complete financial independence. Think about that for a second. Between car payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, most people are dropping $600 to $800 a month on transportation. Over a 40-year period, that is easily $400,000 just to get from A to B. Meanwhile, those same people are complaining they cannot afford to save for retirement. It is like watching someone pay for a gym membership they never use, while complaining about food prices. Here is what makes this even more ridiculous. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses 20% of its value. You're not just spending money, you are actively destroying wealth. Compare that to investing the same amount in an index fund. Instead of watching it evaporate, you would watch it multiply. But I get it. Cars are emotional purchases. You want something reliable, something that looks good, something that feels successful. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know what you're trading off. That car payment might make you feel wealthy, but it keeps you poor. This is where having $20,000 saved completely changes your perspective on major purchases. Instead of asking, can I afford the payment? You ask, what is this really costing me? That $30,000 car is not just $30,000. It is $30,000 that could have grown to $200,000 in 20 years. Suddenly, driving a reliable used car stops feeling like a sacrifice. It feels like a strategic choice, funding your future freedom. And here's the beautiful irony. The person driving the flashy new car is stressed about money, while the person driving the older Honda is quietly building wealth and sleeping better. This mindset shift extends to every major financial decision you make: housing, education, vacations, hobbies. Everything starts getting filtered through the lens of opportunity cost, not obsessively, in a way that drains joy from life, but in a strategic way that ensures you spend on things that actually matter. And let me tell you something that will probably surprise you. Once you think like this, you often realize you do not even want half the stuff you thought you did. That bigger apartment, the extra space would be nice. But is it worth delaying financial independence by 5 years? That expensive hobby is fun, but there are cheaper ways to get the same satisfaction. This is where having $20,000 saved completely changes your perspective on major purchases. Instead of asking, can I afford the payment? You ask, what is this really costing me? That $30,000 car is not just $30,000. It is $30,000 that could have grown to $200,000 in 20 years. Suddenly, driving a reliable used car stops feeling like a sacrifice. It feels like a strategic choice, funding your future freedom. And here's the beautiful irony. The person driving the flashy new car is stressed about money, while the person driving the older Honda is quietly building wealth and sleeping better. This mindset shift extends to every major financial decision you make: housing, education, vacations, hobbies. Everything starts getting filtered through the lens of opportunity cost, not obsessively, in a way that drains joy from life, but in a strategic way that ensures you spend on things that actually matter. And let me tell you something that will probably surprise you. Once you think like this, you often realize you do not even want half the stuff you thought you did. That bigger apartment, the extra space would be nice. But is it worth delaying financial independence by 5 years? That expensive hobby is fun, but there are cheaper ways to get the same satisfaction. This is not about becoming a miser who never enjoys anything. It is about becoming intentional with your money, instead of just letting it slip away on things that do not matter to you. When you have clear financial goals, and you understand compound interest, it becomes easier to tell the difference between what you want and what you really want. Look, $20,000 will not make you rich overnight, but it changes how you think about money and opportunity. It is the difference between surviving and thriving, between reacting to life and designing it. Start building that foundation today, because your future self is counting on the decision you make right now. Trust me, they will thank you for it. If this video reframed how you think about money, drop a like. It helps the channel. Subscribe if you want to keep running the real math together. The banks do not want you running it. We do. I will see you in the next one.